Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to discuss the quintessential cards needed to build the core of a Dinosaur tribal commander deck with Gishath, Sun's Avatar, as the general. Gishath, Sun's Avatar, made its debut in Ixalan and is a 7/6 dinosaur avatar with Trample, Vigilance, and Haste for 5 Naya colors. That's a red, a green, and a white mana. These stats alone make Gishath a worthy selection to occupy the command zone for many EDH players. However, it's the paragraph of text under Gishath's many keyword abilities that grabs the attention of all dinosaur tribal enthusiasts. Whenever Gishath deals combat damage to a player, we reveal that many cards from the top of our library. We put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. We are tasked with sculpting the core of this build to enhance Gishath's combat damage trigger and inundate our side of the battlefield with as many dinosaur creatures as possible. It is through this dynamic that we will claim victory after victory against our opponents. We begin the core of this build with various ways to enhance our general's combat damage trigger. As a 7/6 with Trample, Gishath is a beefy body in combat. Now let's increase the beef. +1/+1 Anthem effects that provide us with additional peripheral benefits are a great place to start. As long as we have the City's Blessing, Radiant Destiny also gives creatures we control vigilance. We get the City's Blessing through this enchantment's Ascend mechanic when we control at least 10 or more permanents. We can pay 3 and tap Icon of Ancestry to look at the top 3 cards of our library. We may reveal a dinosaur creature card from among them and put it into our hand. We put the rest of the cards on the bottom of our library in a random order. Whenever we tap a land for mana, Mirari's Wake adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. Whenever we cast a dinosaur creature spell, Vanquisher's Banner draws us a card. At the beginning of combat on our turn, Glorious Sunrise provides 4 options from which to choose. Either creatures we control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn, target land gains tap, add 3 green mana until end of turn, we draw a card if we control a creature with power 3 or greater, or we gain 3 life. For bigger Anthem effects, Collective Blessing gives creatures we control +3/+3. Beastmaster Ascension gives creatures we control +5/+5 as long as there are at least 7 quest counters on it. We put a quest counter on this enchantment whenever a creature we control attacks. It will not take long before this massive Anthem effect is online. Although they are not Anthem effects, Hero's Blade, Cathar's Crusade, and Rhythm of the Wild are worthy of inclusion. When Gishath comes into play, we can attach Hero's Blade to it for free, which boosts the power and toughness of our general to 10/8. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, Cathar's Crusade puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Rhythm of the Wild gives our non-token creatures Riot, which means that they enter the battlefield with either haste or a +1/+1 counter. As an additional bonus, this enchantment protects our creature spells from being counterspelled. For some temporary power and toughness boosts at the beginning of each combat, both Unnatural Growth and Zopendal Hunger Dominus double the power and toughness of creatures we control until end of turn. We can put an indestructible counter on Zopendal by paying 2 green Phyrexian mana and sacrificing 2 other creatures. Green Phyrexian mana can be paid by either 2 life or 1 green mana. Now that we have enhanced the power and toughness of our general, as well as our other dinosaurs, let's optimize the amount of combat damage we deal. Whenever 1 or more creatures attack, Duelist Heritage provides us the option to have target attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn. Note that this ability can target an opponent's creature as well. Berserker's Onslaught gives attacking creatures we control double strike. Rage Reflection gives creatures we control double strike without restriction. True Conviction follows suit, but also gives our creatures lifelink. Oh, but we're not done yet. Now that we can deal double the damage, let's deal double the damage multiple times each turn. We can pay 3 and 2 red mana and activate Aggravated Assault's ability to untap all creatures we control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. This is an ability that we can activate only as a sorcery. Note that Aggravated Assault is an enchantment and not just a one-and-done sorcery spell. We can activate this ability more than once. Speaking of one-and-done sorcery spells, Relentless Assault is a one-and-done extra combat option. World at War and Waves of Aggression follow suit, except that World at War has Rebound, which means that if we cast this spell from our hand, we exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of our next end step, we may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. Waves of Aggression has Retrace, which means that we can cast this card from our graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. Note that Waves of Aggression can be retraced more than once. These sources of additional combat should end the game very quickly if Gishath is on our side of the battlefield. This is especially true if we plan to take advantage of the many different dinosaur creatures entering the battlefield from our library through Gishath's combat damage trigger. Impact Tremors deals 1 point of damage to each opponent whenever a creature comes into play under our control. Perforos, God of the Forge, deals 2 points of damage instead of 1, and is an indestructible enchantment that is only a creature if our devotion to red is at least 5. To factor our devotion, we count the number of red mana symbols in the casting cost of permanents we control. Perforos also has an activated ability that gives creatures we control +1/+0 until end of turn for each 2 and 1 red mana we pay. Although risky, Pandemonium is another direct damage dealing option. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, that creature's controller may have it deal damage equal to its power to any target of their choice. Our opponents could target us, our creatures, or our planeswalkers as well. We can allay these concerns with Electropotence. It costs 2 and 1 red mana to activate and is a personalized version of Pandemonium. So is Warstorm Surge, and the emblem created by Luca Wayward Bonder does the same. In addition to creating this Warstorm Surge-like emblem, Luca also has Rummage and Creature Recursion loyalty abilities. Rounding out our direct damage dealing options is Where Ancients Tread. It deals 5 damage to any target whenever a creature with power 5 or greater enters the battlefield under our control. We can reap additional benefits from our creatures entering the battlefield other than slinging around direct damage. Angelic Chorus gains us life equal to a creature's toughness when it comes into play under our control. In the Web of War gives the entering creature +2/+0 and haste. Whenever a non-token dinosaur comes into play under our control, Molten Echoes creates a token that's a copy of it. The token gains haste and is exiled at the beginning of the next end step. Mirror March ticks the creature token production up several notches. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we flip a coin until we lose a flip. For each flip we win, we create a token that's a copy of that creature. It gains haste and is exiled at the beginning of the next end step. This enchantment could be game-ending. With combat damage from Gishath and direct damage the foci of the core of this build so far, including some sources of damage acceleration, helps to speed up our dino dynamic. Although risky, both Furnace of Wrath and Dictate of the Twin Gods double the damage dealt to permanents or players. The Dictate also has Flash, which, when cast strategically, could be game-ending. With these 2 enchantments, our opponents could deal double damage to us and permanents we control. We can allay these concerns with Fiery Emancipation and City on Fire. Both of these enchantments triple the damage dealt to a permanent or player by a source we control. City on Fire can be cast ahead of curve through its Convoke mechanic, which allows our creatures to help us cast this spell. Each creature we tap while casting this spell pays for 1 generic mana or 1 mana of that creature's color. Our engine for victory now needs its fuel, and that comes in the form of the best dinosaurs Naya has to offer. Although the overall number of dinosaurs is more important than any individual selections, particularly due to the aforementioned peripheral abilities that synergize with Gishath's combat damage trigger, we would be remiss if we failed to mention some worthy inclusions for the core of this build. Let's begin with some inclusions that enhance combat. Thundering Spineback provides another Anthem effect to our dinosaur creatures, and as a late game mana sink, we can pay 5 and a green mana to create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with Trample. Regisaur Alpha gives other dinosaurs we control haste and creates a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with Trample when it comes into play. Goring Ceratops is a 3/3 with Double Strike, and whenever it attacks, other creatures we control get Double Strike until end of turn. For some peripheral combat benefits, Galta and Mavrin is a 12/12 with Trample, and whenever we attack, we select one of the following two choices. Either we create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur creature token with Trample, where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures, or we create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Whenever a Tali Primal Storm attacks, each player exiles the top card of their library. We may cast any number of spells from among these exile cards without paying their mana costs. Whenever one or more creatures we control with Trample deal combat damage to a player, Quartzwood Crasher creates an XX green dinosaur beast creature token with Trample, where X is equal to the amount of damage those creatures dealt that player. These creature tokens can get out of hand very, very quickly. Thrasta Tempest's Roar is a 7/7 with Trample, Trample over Planeswalkers, and Haste. When a creature tramples over a Planeswalker, it deals excess combat damage to the controller of the Planeswalker it is attacking. This spell also costs 3 less to cast for each other spell cast this turn. Itali Primal Conqueror is a 7/7 with Trample, and when it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. We may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. Also, as an ability that we can activate only as a sorcery, we can pay 9 and 1 green Phyrexian mana to transform the Primal Conqueror into Itali Primal Sickness, an 11/11 with Trample and Indestructible. Whenever the Sickness deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. Remember, a player with at least 10 poison counters loses the game. I'm pretty sure that our opponents will not forget. For some utility benefits, Verdant Sun's avatar acts as a copy of the aforementioned Angelic Chorus, and whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we gain life equal to that creature's toughness. When Regal Behemoth comes into play, we become the Monarch. When a player is the Monarch, they draw a card at the beginning of their end step, and we remain the Monarch until another player's creature deals combat damage to us, at which point that creature's controller becomes the new Monarch. While we're the Monarch, if we tap a land for mana, then Regal Behemoth adds an additional mana of any color to our mana pool. Zilortha, Strength Incarnate, is a 7/3 with Trample. Lethal damage dealt to creatures we control is determined by their power rather than their toughness. Temple Altasaur also protects other dinosaur creatures we control by preventing all but 1 damage from any source that deals damage to them. Creatures with the Enrage mechanic offer peripheral benefits whenever they are dealt damage. Ripjaw Raptor draws us a card. Polyraptor creates a token that's a copy of itself. Bellowing Aegisaur puts a +1/+1 counter on each other creature we control. We also can interact with our opponents through some of our enraged dinosaurs. Silverclad Ferocidons has each opponent sacrifice a permanent. Trapjaw Tyrant exiles target creature an opponent controls until Trapjaw Tyrant leaves the battlefield. When Apex Altasaur enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature we don't control, and each time it's dealt damage, it fights up to 1 target creature we don't control. Apex Altasaur can fight multiple creatures when it enters the battlefield, and as a 10/10, it can survive those fights as well. For the purposes of supporting the enrage mechanic further, we could include a copy of Pyrohemia. If we pay a red mana, then it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. At the beginning of the end step, if there are no creatures on the battlefield, then we must sacrifice this enchantment. Our loss of life is mitigated through the various sources of life gain showcased throughout this video. With this in mind, the benefits of triggering the enrage mechanic, in addition to dealing direct damage to our opponents and their creatures, perhaps Pyrohemia could be considered a win condition in this build. For a little more opponent interaction, creatures they control enter the battlefield tapped with Kinjali's Sunwing. The Tarask is a 10/10 that has haste and ward 10 as long as it was cast, and whenever it attacks, it fights target creature defending player controls. Zacama, Primal Calamity, is a 9/9 with Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and 3 activated abilities. It deals 3 damage to target creature for 2 and a red mana, it destroys target artifact or enchantment for 2 and a green mana, and we gain 3 life for 2 and 1 white mana. When Zacama comes into play, if we cast it, then we untap all lands we control. Some dinosaurs are included simply due to their status of being biggins. Rampaging Brontodon is a 7/7 with Trample, and whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each land we control. Ghalta, Primal Hunger, is a 12/12 with Trample that could cost as little as 2 green mana to cast. Zitalpa, Primal Dawn, is a 4/4 with Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. Tyrannax Rex is an 8/8 with Trample, Haste, Ward 4, Toxic 4, and it cannot be countered. Ward 4 means that whenever an opponent targets this Phyrexian dinosaur with a spell or an ability, that player must pay 4 additional mana. Toxic 4 means that whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player also gets 4 poison counters. Titanoth Rex is an 11/11 with Trample. We also could cycle this card from our hand for 1 and a green mana to draw a card and put a trample counter on target creature we control. Yidaro, Wandering Monster, is an 8/8 with Trample and Haste. We also could cycle this card from our hand for 1 and a red mana to draw a card. If we do, then we shuffle Yidaro into our library from our graveyard. If we have cycled Yidaro 4 or more times during a game, then we put it onto the battlefield instead of our graveyard. Carnage Tyrant is a 7/6 with Trample and Hexproof, and it cannot be countered, while Gigantosaurus is a vanilla 10/10. Let's close out this video with some cards that further synergize with and enhance our dinosaur tribal theme. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under our control, Elemental Bond and Tribute to the World Tree draw us a card. If the creature has a power of less than 3, Tribute of the World Tree puts 2 +1/+1 counters on it instead. When Garruk's Uprising comes into play, we draw a card if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under our control, we draw a card. This enchantment also gives creatures we control trample. Our creatures, including our general, have some hefty mana values. Reducing their costs and finding ways to cheat them into play are paramount considerations for the purposes of gaining and maintaining tempo, particularly if Gishath is languishing in the command zone due to overtaxation. Herald's Horn reduces our dinosaur spells by 1, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we look at the top card of our library. If it's a dinosaur creature card, then we may reveal it and put it into our hand. Urzas Incubator reduces our dinosaur spells by 2. For the purposes of cheating our creatures into play, we can pay 1 and a green mana and tap Monster Manual. There is also an adventure side to this card that can be cast prior to casting Monster Manual. Zoological Study has us mill 5 cards, and then we return a creature card milled this way to our hand. We can pay 3 and tap Belby's Portal to put a dinosaur creature into play from our hand. We can pay 4 and tap Quicksilver Amulet to put any creature card from our hand onto the battlefield. If we tap 2 untapped dinosaurs we control, then Cryptic Gateway puts a dinosaur creature from our hand right onto the battlefield. We also can pay a red mana and activate Sneak Attack. We put a creature card from our hand into play. It gains haste and is exiled at the beginning of the next end step. The creatures are only available for 1 turn, but at just 1 red mana per activation, Sneak Attack could be a game-ending inclusion. Selvala Stampede could be an effective way to get multiple creatures into play during the same turn. Starting with us, each player votes for wild or free. For each wild vote, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature card, and then we put those creature cards onto the battlefield. For each free vote, we may put a permanent card from our hand into play. Genesis Wave also could inundate our side of the battlefield with permanents in 1 turn. We reveal the top X cards of our library, and then we may put any number of permanent cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. This sorcery can help cheat our other non-creature permanents into play as well, particularly our Gishath synergizing enchantments. Speaking of Gishath, we can put our general into play with some of the aforementioned cheat into play effects and abilities. How do we get Gishath into our hand? Well, if we tap and sacrifice Command Beacon, then we can put our commander into our hand from the command zone. We can pay 2, tap and exile Campfire to put all commanders we own from the command zone and from the graveyard into our hand. Then we shuffle our graveyard into our library. Since this is a creature-centric build, replenishing our library with fallen dinosaurs helps to rebuild creature options for Gishath's combat damage trigger. Road of Return provides 2 different options. Either we return target permanent card from our graveyard to our hand, or we put our commander into our hand from the command zone. Each of these cards provides an ability or an effect that allows us to cheat Gishath into play, both ahead of curve and without having to pay any accrued commander tax. Of course, as we have demonstrated throughout this video, once Gishath is in play, we want to maximize the amount of combat damage our general deals in order to put as many dinosaurs into play from our library as possible. Preserving Gishath's presence on the battlefield is paramount to this goal. So let's protect our general with Swiftfoot Boots and Champion's Helm. The boots give Gishath hexproof and haste, while the helm gives it hexproof and +2/+2. We also can add Whisper Silk Cloak, which gives equipped creatures Shroud, and it cannot be blocked. Speaking of not being able to block, let's create some redundancy and include Trailblazer's Boots and Prowler's Helm. The boots give equipped creature non-basic landwalk, and the creature equipped by the helm can only be blocked by walls. Finding an EDH player without any non-basic lands on their side of the battlefield is a feat that is as rare as winter roses, while finding walls may also be quite a challenge. We can allay any of these concerns by including a copy of Rogue's Passage. We pay 4, tap it, and target creature is unblockable until end of turn. In this build, we will win our games through combat damage, direct damage, and commander damage. Hopefully, the relationships with the members of our playgroup will not be damaged as a result. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of a Dinosaur Tribal Commander deck with Gishath Sun's avatar as the general. The cards showcased during this video are suggested options for crafting the thematic core of a Dinosaur Tribal EDH deck, in addition to providing ways of optimizing this theme. Removal spells, disruption, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build, and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. In building around videos like this one, these deck components are left in the hands of each individual deck brewer. If you found this video appealing, then be sure to check out our other building around videos through the playlist on your screen. Also be sure to check out our other deck building series, and don't forget to let me know your thoughts about the core of this Gishath dinosaur build in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.